Welcome back to the Sailing News Show, where we cover the sailing news from the last week. This week we have news from several Sailing World Championships as well as the Tokyo 2021 build-up. We also have news from SailGP and the America's Cup. But first I have an update on the channel. As you may have noticed, I've changed the channel name from Online Sail Coach to Fast Forward Sailing. Let me know what you think of the name and the new logo. It would be great to hear your thoughts. Right, so on to the news. First up, the Finn class has failed in its last-ditch attempt to get reinstated as an Olympic class. The Finn class has been in the Olympic Games longer than any other class, but a few years ago World Sailing opted to remove it as an Olympic event. World Sailing did this to achieve the International Olympic Committee's mandate on equal men and women competing, and the use of common equipment for both genders. This led to World Sailing overhauling the 2024 Olympic programme. They introduced a new mixed two-person offshore keelboat event. However, the International Olympic Committee still doesn't seem to be satisfied. The International Olympic Committee wanted to further review the event in order to properly assess the key considerations around safety and security of the athletes, with a decision to be made no later than May 31st, 2021. This led to rumours that the Finn class might have a last opportunity to get reinstated. Together with the Europe class, the single-handed women's event used in 4 Olympics from 1992 to 2004, the Finn class pitched World Sailing. Here's the joint letter from the Finn and Europe class to World Sailing. It reads, the proposed format would consist of a combined team score across a series of races. Team sports are common across the Olympics, so this is something the International Olympic Committee and spectators can easily identify with. Zsombor Berek's Hungarian world champion from 2018 is very outspoken about the legacy of the Finn and what it brings to the sailing world. He says, I think the Finn needs to be Olympic and I would love to see the Finn again as an individual class at the Olympics. For most of the guys here, if there was no Finn, then we will lose them from Olympic sailing. Current Finn world champion and double America's Cup winner Josh Jr. from New Zealand puts his success down to his grounding in the Finn class. And interestingly, some of the top characters from America's Cup history, some of the top sailors from America's Cup history have originated in the Finn class, including names such as Dean Barker, Russell Coutts and Ben Ainsley. Josh Jr. says, the Finn for us has provided a huge opportunity to grow as sailors, and ultimately being able to sail with Finn, being stronger and learning the techniques and the equipment in the Finn really gave us a head start into getting into the America's Cup and big boat sailing. So it would be a shame if it doesn't stay in the Olympics. Racing for the 2021 Finn Gold Cup started on Saturday, with a practice race on Friday being won by Australian Jake Lilly. Whilst many countries have already selected their athletes to go to the Games, there are still Olympic spots up for grabs. For instance, New Zealanders Josh Jr. and Andrew Maloney are still battling out for the single place in the Finn. Josh Jr. admits he's underprepared for his defence of the Finn Gold Cup, but has huge ramifications to the New Zealand yachting team for the Tokyo Olympics. Winning the title again in Portugal over the next week would be huge for Junior, but simply beating his good friend and America's Cup teammate Andy Maloney might be more important. However, neither have spent much time in the boat, with them both being a part of the winning America's Cup team and New Zealand's new SailGP team. Now, you may assume that all this time sailing amongst the best sailors in the world would improve their chances of performing at the Finn Gold Cup. However, when you're at such a high level, which these Finn sailors are, time in the boat is crucial, and time spent in other boats may actually shape that feel they have sailing the Finn class. But it will be interesting to see how they adjust. At the last Olympics, Josh Jr. contested the Finn class and finished 7th. Maloney narrowly missed out for a berth in the laser class at the 2016 Games, being beaten by Sam Meach, who ended up finishing 3rd. Whoever performs the best at this week's Finn Gold Cup is likely to get the nod for New Zealand's sole berth at the Tokyo Olympics. But it's still a possibility that the Olympic Games won't go ahead this year. It was supposed to go ahead in 2020, but due to the illness, let's say, it got postponed to 2021. Currently, Japan is experiencing record cases, and even if it does go ahead, it's going to be a monumental effort in organisation, and it's going to need a lot of money chucked at it. This article reads that they're wanting 500 more nurses and 200 more sports medicine specialists. The official bill for the Olympics is $15.4 billion, and it's likely going to be much larger. Taxpayers are on the hook for most. So why are the Olympics happening? Because the International Olympic Committee must have its billions in TV money to operate its sports business. So these will be Olympics in which all that matters is getting on TV with athletes as the actors sent into Tokyo. Japan will pay the costs. The International Olympic Committee will reap the benefits. So, do you think the Games should go ahead this year? It would certainly be a shame from a spectator's point of view if it didn't. I expect a lot of the costs of the event are already sunk, so I expect it to go ahead unless there's a huge increase in cases. Fingers crossed that things will have improved by the summer. Now on to some America's Cup news. Luna Rossa have made their first move in their next America's Cup challenge. The Italian team have started a process of shipping their 2 AC75 boats home from New Zealand to their Cagliari base to start training in the European summer. They continue to talk up their effort and reiterate their determination to stay in the game as they await confirmation of when and where the next Cup regatta will be held. Luna Rossa have begun retaining staff, and skipper Max Serena hopes to keep Jewel Helms, Jimmy Spittle and Francesco Bruni on board. However, neither have officially signed on yet. Luna Rossa no longer have a challenger of record status as they did the last Cup, with Sir Ben Ainsley's Team UK taking on the responsibility of working with Team New Zealand to shape the next event. The AC75 class will be retained as the class, but we are still waiting on news for a location of the Cup. A one-off challenge between the Kiwis and Brits in the UK is amongst several options being considered by Team New Zealand. However, this isn't popular with fans. There are also offshore alternatives to having the full regatta sailed in Auckland, though a home defence remains a preference if it is financially viable. And I think a lot of people have been surprised about Team New Zealand's open-mindedness about the event being hosted elsewhere. Like most things, it seems it all comes down to money, and specifically a lack of it. Team New Zealand's main sponsor, Emirates, has had a tough year financially, being in the aviation industry trying to cope with the pandemic. Without Emirates funding available, Team New Zealand are having to look at other options. 2 other potential offshore venues I've heard floated have been China and the Middle East. Let me know your thoughts on where you'd like to see the next America's Cup held. Selfishly, being a Brit myself, I would like to see the Cup held somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere, so us Northerners get an opportunity to see these amazing boats in action. Continuing with the article, it reads, Luna Rossa's move to return their 2 boats to Italy is significant. They always maintain their first version was competitive, and outwardly, the Italians made the least design changes of teams moving forward. Their 2 boats, with some upgrades, would be competitive training partners. New rules are expected to allow syndicates to sell their first boats to help new teams into the regatta. United States challenger American Magic have retained their Auckland base, with both of their boats being stored there. It is understood that Team UK also still have their 2 boats in Auckland. On to the next article, the headline reads, American Magic ready to sail at 7 to 8 days notice if Auckland gets the 37th America's Cup venue nod. American Magic skipper Terry Hutchinson says if the next venue is in Auckland, they will be ready to sail within 7 to 8 days notice. Otherwise, they will head back to the USA. Everything is pretty much how they left it from the last America's Cup, so starting up again will be a relatively quick operation. Hutchinson goes on to say, we leave it in a position that if we get the nod to go sailing in New Zealand, we don't have too much work to do. And if the next event is not going to be in New Zealand, then we are in a spot where we can put everything on a ship, decommission the tents, and pack everything up to ship back to the US. After the event, the Americans rebuilt their AC75 Defiant, and Hutchinson says, if someone wants to buy a first generation AC75, they can, she's ready to go. So it sounds like a lot of the teams are in no man's land, not knowing where the next event will be held, and in the meantime trying to sell off their AC75s to new teams so they can raise some money to fund their next campaign. On to some more sailing results. Over the last week, we've had the 49er and 49FX Championship in Cascais. With a day to go, we've got the Spanish Tamara Echegoyen winning with a fairly significant lead over second place Germans Tina Lutz and Susanna Buch. 2 top teams aren't doing so well, with a British pair Charlotte Dobson and Saskia Tai down in 5th, with Brazilians Martin Grail and Kahina Kunz down in 6th. Winning the 49er men, we have someone I've never heard of, Nevin Snow, winning with his crew Dane Wilson. It doesn't look like an event where the top dogs have turned up, with several big names missing. Now on to the results of the 470 European Championships, which ended yesterday. The French boat, helmed by Camille Leconte, who are familiar with being at the top of the leaderboard, took away the trophy, with Britain's most successful female sailor, Hannah Mills, coming away with second. They've also got the mixed results, that was won by Natai Hassoun, and it still looks like a lot of the star power from the 470 women and 470 men's fleet still hasn't come across to the 470 mixed fleet yet, but I'm sure that will only be a matter of time. In the 470 men's fleet, it was won by New Zealanders Paul Snow-Hansen and Dan Wilcock, with the French in second, and Jordi Zammer and Nicholas Rodriguez in third. Interestingly, Australians Matt Belcher and Will Ryan, who have been so dominant over the past few Olympics, were down in fourth. So is that a sign of things to come in Tokyo? It will be interesting to see how it pans out. Lastly, we have some SailGP news. We have Nina Curtis coming on board with Team Australia. She's been selected to join the Australian team for the duration of Season 2, following a development and training camp at Bermuda. The programme, launched last year, aims to create an end-to-end pathway to expand female participation in the sport, and ultimately in SailGP. There seems to be a lot of talk about getting females on the boats, so it'll be interesting to see when that actually happens. And lastly, tickets are now on sale for the Plymouth SailGP event in the UK. This is going to be taking place in July, and it's expected to bring in an £80 million boost to Plymouth. This is a poster of the event. Is it symbolic that the Brits are leading the other teams? Do you think that Ainsley's going to repeat his past 2 SailGP victories? I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. Personally, I'm looking forward to being at this event. Plymouth is a lovely venue if you can make it over here. This is the iconic Plymouth Hoe, which will provide an excellent place for spectators to watch the action. So I look forward to seeing some of you down there. So that concludes the video. Did you enjoy the format of going through more news stories this time? Usually I try to stick to one news story per video, but I thought I'd change things up. So let me know what you thought. And if you want to stay up to date with the latest sailing news, press the subscribe button and then the alerts bell, and you'll get an alert every time I release a new video. So with that said, I'll see you next time.